So welcome back, guys. Today we're gonna focus on something a little different than the usual because I wanna, as the name of the channel implies, I wanna take this focus channel a bit more on the rest of the East as well, and not just on China, even though that's where all the big news happens. So, but this is a little related to China, and I'll get into why. Not only is Afghanistan along the Belt and Road Initiative, but because it's along the Belt and Road Initiative, it's going to be, well, it was a target for the US, and as are all the other countries that are closest to China. And but we'll get into what happened in Afghanistan, which this excellent document, which was shared on Reddit. And it's titled "How the U.S. Deliberately Destroyed Afghanistan." So we'll go through the main body of the paper and some of the links because of their nature, the war crimes and stuff. I won't be going through them, but I'll have the links in the description. So there's been this Western narrative on Afghanistan, and there is some misinformation about the current government, and we go into a lot of the history of how the current government came to be and stuff like that. So it shows how U.S. policy caused 9/11 in the first place. U.S. refusing to give evidence of Osama's involvement and refusing the Taliban's offer to put Osama on trial by a third party. It shows how the U.S. is causing a humanitarian disaster by freezing aid, freezing Afghanistan's own money, and sanctioning the nation, which has caused businesses all over the country to cripple and kill many children. Fake news stories as well as narratives are exposed, showing how much of what is shown in the Western media about the IEA is factually false. This includes women's rights. It shows that women are on TV, schools, and job. But the media lies about these things. It shows how the war crimes, destruction did far more damage than the tiny amount of aid helped. The vast majority of the aid was not used to help the people at all, but was stolen or wasted. The US never gave Afghans a chance to make a stable country because the US put pedophiles, rapists, thieves, killers, corrupts in power. It also shows the progress being made by the IEA, which is not shown in the media. So, I'm not really expert on Afghanistan, but even I know a little bit of their history. They were formerly socialist. I think it was in the 80s, and the US, USSR as well. They messed up the country. So that's a whole other topic, and he might be going through that here. The comment claimed that the US was justified in invading Afghanistan after 9/11 is false. The hijackers were not from Afghanistan. All countries have sovereignty, and international law requires evidence and trial for criminals. The US refuses, negating the notion of independence at all. The Taliban offered to give Osama bin Laden to the US if they give evidence of involvement, yet the US refused. So you have all your sources and links in this document. And I'll have that in my description. So a lot of propaganda efforts to support the war in Afghanistan by the US. Contrary to current perception that it was just the leaders that wanted war, it was actually supported by 88% of Americans. Osama bin Laden's full transcript commentary on 9/11 years after the event. The idea that corporations were using the war to enrich themselves was regarded as propaganda and conspiracy theory at the time. Yet it is now commonly accepted among Americans. Osama says that 9/11. Sorry about that. Osama says that 9/11 did not happen because of the West's freedoms, but because the West attacked Iraq, Kuwait, Lebanon, killing over 1 million people. Hillary Clinton explains how the US created the same people they were fighting, and how the US betrayed other countries who helped them. War crimes and destruction against Afghanistan. Hundreds of thousands of people were killed in the Afghanistan and USA war, and countless war crimes committed. Drone attacks, as well as international destruction of entire villages, massacres, and indiscriminate shooting, have killed far more than the figure the US gave out. The aid given was a tiny fraction of the amount used to destroy infrastructure in the first place. The US allied itself with known thieves, war criminals, rapists, pedophiles, corrupts, and not only allowed such crimes to occur but worked with and protected them, as they do, punishing those who attempted to even investigate. The following details several of the war crimes and methods of destruction, but reveals the various angles of how many civilians were killed and covered up. Property destroyed, crimes committed, permanently damaged. So you got all the crimes, war crimes that did happen. That is even documented actually. So even more could have happened, but we just don't know. So you got all the stuff here. Some of it is a bit too. It would get my channel like have the video taken down. So it's all the usual stuff here, but then it gets a bit more grisly down below. Yeah. So you got all the standard U.S. I guess Anglo stuff there. So the U.S. is directly responsible for the economic and humanitarian disaster currently ongoing in Afghanistan, not the Taliban. This section details how the frozen Afghan bank funds are not aid money, but Afghan sovereign wealth. It shows how the sanctions are destroying businesses all over the country. It shows how the US is also blocking donations from people and groups all over the world from helping starving children, who are the main casualties. There have been zero credible reports of the Taliban stealing any of the tons of aid donated by countries like China, Pakistan, Iran, Turkey, Kazakhstan. So the idea that the aid would do nothing is another false notion. Red Cross blames the US for the humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. So we know China's been giving a lot of aid for the winter in Afghanistan because the winter there is brutal. And yeah, I feel like the reports of the Taliban stealing the tons of aid is just another American projection, because it's what America does, It steals aid designated for other countries or other groups, So they're just projecting again. So you got all your links here. So the average Afghan is locked out of their own bank accounts. They cannot do business, and thus the owner of a company cannot pay suppliers or his workers of him over 100-hour women. So yeah, it's the kind of situation. So even Afghan YouTubers can't even make money from YouTube anymore because of US sanctions. It was not the Taliban but the previous US-backed government that did not pay the workers' wages for months. The aid myth. So most of the aid given to Afghanistan was military. Only small amounts of aid were spent in rebuilding, but did not even cover the cost of the damages done by initial bombing. Out of that, much was simply stolen by corrupt criminals or rebombed after construction. The vast majority of aid was military, which ended up causing more damage than the tiny amount of real aid. So US and international companies paid, then cheaply built things that were never used. Sometimes building nothing at all. Most of what was built wasn't needed or wanted. Out of billions spent, just a few million worth of things were in good condition. More than half of the medical facilities built by the US did not meet contract standards. More than a third were actually hazardous with structural damage, and many had no running water or electricity. It is not known where a third of them were even built, and a couple were built in the wrong country. Money for even basic equipment for hospitals was stolen. People were extorted for even basic services. Innocent people criminalized unless they paid school and hospital wages stolen. Using cheap material to repair highways that remained unusable. So many joined the Taliban. Allies destroyed projects because they weren't given the contract. Regarding women's rights, if the Taliban banned women from going to school, why are women and girls attending school and universities in Afghanistan? Why are more and more schools opening for both boys and girls in Afghanistan? Women are on Afghan TV, do not need to cover their face, etc. The Taliban were legendary in Afghanistan in the 90s for protecting women and children from rape, brutally punishing criminals. The reason there was so much crime was because after the Soviets and the US left, it was a free-for-all. Any commander essentially had his own fiefdom, because they had weapons left over from the war. It was a feudal era. Although the commanders were called Mujahideen, they were not religious, just fighters, and many were drug addicts. No one opposed them until the religious Mujahideen, I think, banded together against lawlessness. They were the Taliban. US then allied themselves with the same criminals that the Taliban had deposed. So, standard US behavior. So you got a lot of the links debunking the myths around Afghanistan now and the current government, and it explains partially why the current government managed to capture the country so quickly, and without any bloodshed at all. Since the liberation of Afghanistan, no massacre by the Taliban has happened. General amnesty has been declared. Hundreds of thousands of people fought against the Taliban, but there had been no mass killings, in spite of them having sided with invasive forces. Hundreds of US state-sponsored generals left behind in Afghanistan in evacuation. Thus, thousands of disseminating propaganda for 20 years during the war, including Voice of America, Radio Free Asia, all that, which have been admitted by the CIA to being created by the CIA. US and its allies killed more civilians than the Taliban did. So there was a really good response from their spokesman to a question, why are so many Afghans leaving the country? If the US passed a plane at the Delhi airport allowing common Indians to fly out of India into America, lakhs of Indians will leave within hours. That is true, actually. So this was a thing I learned about, that the Taliban destroyed the Bamiyan Buddha. And I thought it was because of religion back then, but apparently not. It's because of sanctions. So you got a lot of the is pretty much an expose on American propaganda. You got a lot of there's a lot of links you can check out in your own time. U.S. Other information: U.S. kidnapped women and took them to their bases. The Taliban controlled large portions of Afghanistan during the war. Drug use went up during U.S. occupation, even with many allies failing drug tests. So yeah, there's a lot of stuff, particularly here, that I can't show on this video. So what I think, considering how quick they took the country, and I think their more moderate stance, like way more moderate stance nowadays. They're actually more moderate than the current Indian government, which is pretty crazy. But yeah, I think it has to. This is just speculation on my part, but I think there has to have been some either Russian or some Chinese involvement in like training them, and why they're like so now, how they managed to capture Afghanistan in just a few days, really. And yeah, and they're much more moderate stances now, and they're much more open-minded, much more willing to work with others. So yeah, I think there's been some their current professionalism might have been because of some training from either Russia or China, but I can't say for certain. There's no evidence. It's a speculation on my part. So yeah, so this is the current situation in Afghanistan, and I'll see you guys in the next video.